Hi, I'm Amanda and I'm going to continue my story of trying to conceive using donor eggs. So just to quickly recap, I had premature ovarian failure, which can be summed up as early menopause, when I was 11 and diagnosed officially at age 13. So I knew from that age that the only way for me to have a family was through IVF and donor eggs. So today I'm going to talk you through the process of our treatment and what happened when we were ready to start a family. When we made the decision, we made a few phone calls because I had a funny inkling about where we lived that we may not be eligible for funding, and I was right. So we didn't get any NHS funding. We could have appealed for it, but the wait list for donor eggs was 2 years long, even if we did get through the appeal. And personally, I just needed to kind of get it done. I didn't want to wait that long. I just knew so much about IVF and things that I just needed to kind of do it. If I was doing it, I was doing it. And fortunately, we were able to get a credit card with a high enough limit to be able to fund treatment for us. And I understand that that's not going to be an option for everyone, and it's such a shame. So my heart goes out to you if you don't get funding or you get limited attempts. Sometimes they'll give you 1 attempt, sometimes they'll give you 3 attempts, depending on where you live and what your NHS practice allows, basically. So we chose our private clinic by using the HFEA website, and it has a lot of all of the success rates through the last few years of each clinic, and you can kind of look and see if it's just IVF or it's ICSI, it's IUI, egg donation, and you can see their success rates, and it will also kind of rank them the top 3 in the country, things like that. And we used the branch of Care Fertility, and 2 of their branches were in the top 2, and the one we used was within that top 2 as well. So that was kind of a good sign for us. So that's a really good place to start if you just pop into Google IVF clinic success rates, and you'll be able to look yourself. It also sometimes will tell you the approximate wait lists. It might be a little bit different now. This was back in 2017 that we were looking. It might be even more informative now, so it'd be worth a little look there. So we called them and they were so responsive straight away, really answered any questions they could without going into, too much medical stuff. And they said because we were travelling a little way, they were going to do all our initial appointments in 1 day, which was great. The only thing I'd have to do was go down the day before those appointments to have some tests done, so they had the results for our consultation. So I had to go down and have my blood tests, which just test hormone levels, and a internal ultrasound, which looked at the size of my uterus, the health of it, and the thickness of my uterine lining. The next day we went down, and it kicked off with the egg donation coordinator meeting. And as that was beginning, my husband was doing his semen analysis, bless him, and he had to kind of pop into the meeting after he'd done his thing, and this egg donation coordinator went, "How did it go?" It still makes me laugh now. He just went beetroot. Anyway, right, so the biggest question that I always get asked when I'm sharing my journey, 2 questions, is how did you decide to use donor eggs, and how do you choose a egg donor? Now, in this egg donation coordinator meeting, you don't need to have made up your mind. It should tell you all the options and what's available to you. And I found it so informative, and I knew so much about IVF through my own research, but I learned so much in that meeting. So in the meeting, they will go through the ethical side of it. So the genetic parent versus the the recipient parent, and how the donor can withdraw consent up until the point that that embryo is placed in the recipient, and just to be aware of that. And they said it's normally very rare that happens, especially when someone's been all the way through the process of donating their eggs. And yes, they'll just take you through that side of things first, and then they will go through a list of things that you would like, basically, and you can request as much or as little as you wish. The only thing I'd say is the more you request, the longer your wait might be. and it depends on what you're requesting. For me, I was quite relaxed with it because I'm aware I'm mixed race, obviously, and I didn't think there'd be that many donors of my ethnicity and my colouring. But you never know. Apparently the most common colouring is Caucasian brunette. So that's got quite a short wait list, and then it's blonde and blue eyed, and then it goes into kind of different minorities. So I was quite, you know, open. I basically wasn't bothered about too much, but you could go as far as you liked. You could request a certain level of education, height, build, eye colour, hair colour, skin colour, ethnicity, personality traits, religion. There's so much you could request if you wanted to. For honesty, what I requested was ideally brown eyes, dark hair, just so it wasn't really obvious at the school gate that I was not genetically this child's parent, because my husband is Caucasian and blue-eyed and quite fair-skinned. So I didn't want it to be too obvious for the child's benefit, not for me, because I was aware this was going to be my journey the whole time. So I did say possibly not red hair, because they tend to have a lighter skin tone, although I love red hair. And she did agree with me. She says, we don't really get many donors of your ethnicity, but ironically, a few months ago, we had a donor of your colouring, and she didn't want to wait around, so she just donated, and they're on freeze. So it does happen, and that sort of stuck in my head, and you'll see where it's going shortly. But that is the other thing as well that they'll discuss with you. You can have a fresh donor and a frozen donor cycle. So a fresh donor cycle is when you and the donor will sync up together. So you're basically on the same menstrual cycle. They'll put both of you on hormones to get you to that kind of sync level. And that would just mean that your uterus is ready for when she'll be having her eggs collected, and then they'll be fertilized with the sperm you're using, and then 3 to 5 days later they'll be implanted into you. So that's a fresh cycle. With frozen, they are basically there, so you have no one to sync up with, and they basically defrost them, fertilize them, and put them in on day 3 or 5. It really is that quick. So there is a lot of bad press about frozen eggs, that they have low success rates, and we got told the difference was marginal, and they do often end up cheaper. However, it was recommended to us to have ICSI, which is when they inject the sperm into the egg, because sometimes after they're frozen, the outer layer is a little bit harder, so it just means that the sperm can get through easier, and then that's an additional cost, so it kind of works out the same. But I think more and more research is actually coming out that frozen eggs might have a slightly better success rate, because they are suggesting doing a freeze-all program now, because when they survive the freezing and thawing process, it shows they're quite strong. But you maybe ask some questions and do your own research in case I've got that wrong. But anyway, so that's what will happen at your egg donation meeting. They will sort of take you through those options, and you'll make your requests. And all I did was darker hair and eyes, and I ticked skin colour, I ticked Caucasian, black, Mediterranean, and mixed race. I've got quite a few races in me, so I could have gone like down a few lines basically. So that was what I requested, but you could go as big or as little as you wanted. After that meeting, we then went to the counsellor, I think it was. So you see a counsellor, and again, I get asked this question quite a lot. It's not you being assessed. You're not having some sort of like social worker meeting. And even I was nervous. It's also not assessing your mental health. It's not that sort of counselling. It's counselling as in it's information, especially down the donor conception route. So they will take you through the, you know, pros and cons of using donor conception, the pros and cons of telling the child and not telling the child, ways to tell the child. It was really, really informative actually. And they asked us, did we know what we were going to do? And we were very certain that we were going to tell the child. And that's a decision you need to make for yourself. I'm not going to say much more that's said in the counselling meeting, but it's good, it's reassuring of whatever decision you make. They don't try and push you one way or the other. They did say that the UK plan to have a donor conceived person agency by the year 2023, and basically it will be a support network for donor conceived children, people. And also, if, for example, so a man can donate sperm up to 10 families basically, so per sample there's millions of sperm, so there could be quite a few siblings. And if they register with this agency, they may be able to find each other, because in the UK, donation is not anonymous. You can request details at age 16 and 18. You can get a certain set at 16 and then full set at age 18. And that's what it was back then anyway. It was only 4 years ago, but that's what it was back then. And that made me quite comforted that they will have that support network if they want it. But however, just to let you know, if the kids don't register, they won't be contacted, they won't be found. It's not like we will find you. So if you choose not to tell, they're not going to get contacted, so don't worry about that. But that's what happens in the counselling one. And you know, if you do choose to tell, they'll give you different ways and information and resources you can use to tell your child, and I've used several of those since already. And my oldest is only 2.5, so I don't think he's quite getting it yet, but he asks questions every so often, so it's reassuring to know that he's understanding it from such an early age, which was really important to me. And there is no right or wrong decision with telling or not telling. I think it's completely your own personal choice, and you do need to do what's right for you entirely. We then had the meeting with the consultant, and they had our results, my results and Tom's results, and then kind of what would happen going forward. Tom had like super sperm, A star, perfect, everything was great, as of course it would be. There was more problems with me than just not really having any eggs. So my uterus was teeny tiny. They suspect it probably stopped growing when I'd gone through the menopause and, you know, premature ovarian insufficiency came. So, you know, early teens basically. And the thinness of my uterine lining was really, really thin. So ideally for IVF, they want it to be 8 to 10 millimeters thick, and mine was only 2.8 millimeters thick at this point. So they kind of outlined the risks and the statistics of that, saying it's unlikely IVF would work, and if it did, I had increased chance of miscarriage or premature birth, early birth, sorry. So yeah, that was fun. I was like, really? Can it not get any worse? So they told me that it was going to take quite a lot of treatment to increase the size of my uterus because it was so teeny tiny, and they'd put me on a high level of hormones, so hormone replacement therapy, to try and do that. And then after 3 months, if it wasn't thick enough, they'd try a different method of thickening it up. So I think they said gels potentially, or patches, and just try different forms of hormones to see. So I was sent away saying it was going to be a few months, and that was the September. So they basically weren't going to see me again till the December. So I had this very high dose of HRT. Now I'm on HRT anyway for my condition, and it was double what I'm on normally. So within 1 week, my boobs had doubled in size and was so sore. And I could feel like cramping down there. So I feel like my uterus is growing. I feel like I can feel it. And people that knew I was joking around with, I was like, I can feel it like growing. It's always like pulsing. And I did extra things, like I took vitamin E tablets, I drank red raspberry leaf tea, Brazil nuts. I'd done all these, you know, extra things. They might have helped, they might not have. Who officially knows? So I had this really strong feeling that it was all going in the right direction, and I actually had a really big decision to make, because in that October I was due to go to India to do my yoga teacher training, but India is a Zika infected country, so when you come back then you had to wait 6 months after getting back to have treatment. And I actually spoke to a consultant and they said, go, your body's not going to be ready by then, you might as well go, get back, because I've been there a month, get back, 6 months later it'd be the spring and you'll probably be about ready. And it was itching and itching and itching at me, telling me not to go, and I cancelled it, and I rung the clinic and said, can I go and get a gynecological scan and just see what's happening. And this was after 4 weeks of being on this HRT. I was right. I'd gone from 2.8 to 7 millimeters in 4 weeks, and then they were happy to proceed. So then the egg donation coordinator called me and she said, right, let's get you on this list then, on the wait list, which is about 3 months long. And I said, you know, that donor you mentioned, like, is that still there? She's like, yeah, no one wants that specification, so if you want them, they're yours. And I said, yeah. And then she was like, okay, let me get the details. And this lady had left a letter, and she read it to me on the phone, and then she read out her characteristics, and she could not have been any more me. She was same height, same build, same ethnicity, like exactly the same mix. And her personality was really, really similar to mine as well. So with this letter, not all donors leave a letter. So they're basically asked to do a pen portrait. They don't have to, but a pen portrait can be whatever they interpret it of. So some people will draw a picture, some people will write a letter, they'll write it to you, they'll write it to the potential children. And this was addressed to the children, and it was a really, really sweet letter, and I've still got it, and I've got it ready to show the boys when the time comes. And I also found out that she already had children, which is a good thing to pick in a donor, actually. So proven fertility, having their own children. So it's weird to think, I always think sometimes like they've got a half sister. It's so weird. And yeah, so that was really nice. So I got those eggs. And then I literally had transfer 4 weeks later on the 5th of December, and my first positive test within that 2 weeks. So by the time I would have got back from India, I was already pregnant. So it worked out really, really well for me. It was really, really quick. So I'll go through that a little bit more. So once you have the eggs, however you get them, fresh or frozen. So mine were frozen, they were defrosted. And that day that they were taken out of the freezer, Tom went and done his official sample. I was on Progunova estrogen 17 days prior to this, and they checked my lining on day 11, and it was all fine. I think it was up to 8 mil by then. So this was about a week later that they done the ICSI. So they injected the eggs. We had 7 eggs from this donation. And out of those 7, 6 fertilised, which is a really, really high rate, really, really high. And then they are left for 3 or 5 days. Now, they ideally will leave them for 5, but if they feel like they're not doing too well, they'd want to do a transfer on day 3, because sometimes they can survive and do better in the uterus than in incubators. We upgraded and had Care Maps, it's called, which is a time-lapse incubator. So the incubator isn't open and closed to check. It's basically kept closed so the temperature is regulated, and pictures are taken every 20 minutes. And then what they do is they grade the embryos by watching this time-lapse video really slowly, and they can see any abnormalities. Now, they said that 2 of ours were developing really, really quick, which wasn't a good sign. So they were keeping an eye on those. And then the rest were quite steady. They were fertilised on the Thursday, so we only had the update on the Friday and then had to wait all weekend, and it was the longest weekend for me ever, because I was like, on Monday they're going to call and they've all gone, they've not worked, and yeah, it's a roller coaster. It really is a roller coaster. But Monday morning they rang us and all 6 were still there. They were still concerned about 2 of them, and they said they'd ring me the next day, which is a Tuesday, which would have been transfer. So they ring you that morning and tell you if they've survived, and that's when they'll recommend how many embryos you have put back in. So they recommended to me that I only have 1 put back in because of my age and how well my body responded to the hormones and how good the embryos were. So they graded 4 of them, 4 out of the 6 top grade, and each clinic grades them differently, so there's no point of me saying what the grade was. But we had 1 that was top and then 2 that were just, I'll just say it. So we had a 2-1, 2 2-2s and 1 2-3. So they put the 2-1 back into me at 12 o'clock on that day, and that's now my 2.5-year-old, which is crazy. And then they put the rest in the freezer, and that is like literally it. And then if that doesn't work, you'll have a FET, a frozen embryo transfer, because all those embryos would have been frozen. And I just had, well, not just had, almost a year ago now, had a FET to have my second son, which is, the whole thing's even quicker. So you just go on the estrogen, day 11, have your lining checked, day 17, comes out the freezer, put it in. That was literally it. I went to the clinic once. It's a bit different because it was COVID as well, but I literally went to the clinic once to have him put in, and yeah. That was it. It was the weirdest thing ever. There was no blood test, like none of that whatsoever. So that was basically how we chose a donor, and how we had our 2 pregnancies, which is absolutely wild that I have 2 boys now. A little bit about why people donate. I don't think most of the donors are just donors. What happens is people can get their IVF paid for if they donate half of their egg collection. So a lot of them you might see shared collection. So if they're going for IVF for whatever reason, and they meet the guidelines basically of donating, then if they had an egg retrieval and they had 10 eggs, they'd donate 5 of them, and they'd get the IVF cost, which is normally around 3.5 grand of the total cost, not their drugs or anything, paid for. So Care do this with sperm as well, so it was something we were going to look into, but it wasn't going to fit into our lifestyle because there's quite a lot of tests that need to be done, and we didn't live near the clinic. But if you donate sperm and you're using it in the treatment, because it's gone through everything, they basically just donate half the sperm. And obviously sperm goes a lot further than eggs. You get millions per donation, and eggs it's like up to 10 or 20. So that is a couple of ways that people donate. You do get many people that just donate from the kindness of their heart. A lot of people that have heard my story, I know of 3 people that have gone on to donate their eggs, which is just amazing. So some people just do it because they either don't want kids, they know someone who can't have kids, or they just have heard about it and like, well, you know, I don't need all of my eggs, let's donate a few. And if you do donate, they don't take all of them out, it is just a collection. But yeah, that is our little story, how it happened. And I think in my next vlog I'll be talking about the ways I look at, well, even before having them, the ways I looked at donor conception and how I look at it now, because that tends to be quite helpful for people. I hope that's been insightful. I know it might be a bit complicated, but that's how it all happened. Thank you so much for watching, and I'll see you in the next vlog.